Welcome to the Autism Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Janine Hershkovitz, and it's my goal to help you create a more peaceful home while living with autistic and neurodivergent loved ones. Each episode, we focus on a different room in the house and help you create a peace plan for your home. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Autism Blueprint Podcast. In today's episode, I am thrilled to have Dr. Wendy Marsh join us once again to discuss a crucial topic: late diagnosis in autism. With her extensive background in special education and psychology, Wendy brings valuable insights into the experiences of adults who discover their autism later in life. We'll explore the challenges of masking, the impact of receiving a late diagnosis on identity, and the importance of understanding sensory experiences. So whether you're a parent, professional, or someone navigating the world of autism, this conversation is packed with information and lots of support. So let's dive in. Well, Dr. Marsh, thank you so much for coming back on the Autism Blueprint Podcast. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Janina, please call me Wendy.
Wendy, thank you. Well, Wendy, it's so good to have you back. And we're going to be talking today about late diagnosis, because I know there's a lot of questions out there about it. And you and I talk this stuff all the time. So I'm just going to kind of do a basic, just kind of for the listener out there that is wondering, is their adult child autistic? Is their teenage child autistic? You know, there's just so much happening in this field. So start by telling us a little bit about your background and what led you to focus on this population.
Well, I've kind of got a long background, but I'll make it short. 20 years, I was a special ed teacher, and my favorite kids were the most interesting ones, which in retrospect, I figured they were probably autistic, but not identified. Then I went back to school. The next 20 years, I was a school psychologist, a licensed educational psychologist, and a behavior analyst. I don't practice as a behavior analyst, but I did get that training. And I, when I retired, I used to identify toddlers and infants, like age 18 months to 3 years, for autism. That was what I did all day, every day for my county office of education in California. And then I retired. Now, along the way, I learned that 2 of my 3 children, now grown, and my husband, my late husband, were all autistic, and we didn't know it. They looked so different from the little people that I had been testing, but they were autistic. That population doesn't have a lot of people looking out for them. You know, the kids are okay. There's lots of people who are really focusing on how can we help these autistic children, as they should, because they deserve it. But the grown-ups need help too.
Absolutely. So what patterns or common experiences do you notice among adults that are starting to discover that they're autistic later in life?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of them have been masking without even knowing that they were. When they started school, they might have looked around and seen, oh, everybody else isn't doing this when they're nervous, or doing this when they're excited, or whatever it is that they do to self-regulate their emotions. The other kids aren't doing it. And they try to do something different. They might bite the insides of their cheeks, or jiggle their leg, or just tap their fingers, just kind of subtly. And they work hard to get by, assuming that everyone else is working just as hard. That we all experience intense pain every time the bell rings, but everybody else must be so much stronger because they are still working while I have to cover my ears and cower. So instead of thinking, I need extra help, they think, I'm weak, or I'm broken, or there's something wrong with me. And the truth is, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just autistic. Once they realize that everybody else is not working as hard as they are, and they start learning about autism, whether it's on TikTok or all the different places where people talk about it, then they come to realize that, hey, I am doing okay for someone with autism. I'm doing great. I just have a different brain. It's not a bad brain. It's not, I'm not a bad friend. I'm just a different kind of a friend.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned masking, which I've found is one of the things that keeps someone from receiving a diagnosis appropriately sometimes. Talk about what is masking and how does it present?
Yeah, basically, masking is pretending to be normal. And,
Mm.
I can't say the word normal without the finger air quotes
Mhm.
because what is normal. Um, but if they are pretending really hard to be like everyone else, often they're successful at it, and then they can't get a diagnosis because they don't look autistic. Um, they may hate making eye contact, but they'll force themselves to either they might have a routine like I'm going to look at your eyes for 5 seconds, I'm going to look away for 3 seconds, I'm going to look back. And they're counting seconds while they're carrying on the conversation. I mean, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Or they're looking at the corner of the glasses, or they're looking at the forehead or the nose. They're doing something to avoid something that's very difficult for them. And
Mm.
when they go to a doctor, they think this is important. I must really try hard to make eye contact because I'm talking to this doctor. And the doctor doesn't ask, what is eye contact like for you? How does it feel? Do you have a system for managing eye contact? They just look and say, oh, you're making eye contact with me. And if they're faking it well, the doctor thinks they're making it. So they think, oh, you can't be autistic. But I'll tell you, as somebody who's not autistic realizes, those of us in the neuro majority never think about eye contact.
Right.
We never think about it. It doesn't come up. We don't have a routine for it. It's like breathing. We don't think about breathing. So if you're thinking about eye contact, maybe you're autistic, and congratulations.
Yeah, and so just to let our audience know, there's definitely more than one or two areas, so this can
Yes.
be a very complicated thing. But
Yeah.
what do you think? How does receiving that diagnosis later in life impact a sense of identity in a person? Is that affected?
Yes. Many people feel a huge relief. Uh, they are able to reframe their entire history, their childhood, their teenager years, um, realizing that it wasn't that they were always at fault, that they were always bad at doing things. It was
Mhm.
just that they had a different kind of a brain and it processed differently and it presented differently. And there's nothing wrong with different. So to be able to forgive yourself for the times that you thought, oh, I was so stupid that day, and to replay in your mind all the times that you blundered in a conversation,
Mhm.
or that you had no idea if someone was flirting with you or just being friendly. No
Yeah.
clue, you know. And also to forgive the other people in your life. If your parents didn't know you were autistic, they were probably doing the best they could with the information they had at the time. And
Yes.
either they didn't know much about autism, which many people didn't. If you're an adult now, your parents back then wouldn't have known.
Mhm.
Or maybe they were autistic too. And in which case it's like, well, she's just like me. So that's not autistic. We're normal.
That
Normal.
that's occurred in my own family with extended family members. Yeah, and I don't have to say who, but they don't listen to my podcast
No.
anyway. But I've
Okay.
had I've had extended family members be like, "I'm trying to tell my dad I'm autistic, and he's not believing me." And I just laugh and say, "Oh, that's because he's autistic too." But let's,
Yeah.
you
There's a
know,
lot of that.
yeah. And, depending on the age of a person, I know in our office, we see people in their early 20s up into, gosh, we recently diagnosed someone last month at age like 73.
Yeah.
And you think, well, what's the point at this point?
You
Right?
know,
So what do you say to that?
yeah, I have heard that. I've heard people say, "Well, what's the difference? You're out of school, so you can't have special education.
Mhm,
And if you're in your 70s, if you're retired, you can't even get work accommodations because you don't need it."
mhm,
But that understanding, that knowing who you are, and knowing that you're not alone. There are a lot of people who perceive the world very similarly to the way you do, and they're good people, and you're a good person. By the time you're 70, if you've been undiagnosed for all that time, you probably have a buildup of thinking that you're bad at things, of having negative thoughts about yourself.
Mhm.
And at any age, if you can release that guilt or self-recrimination and just accept yourself and say, I am okay. I
Yeah.
am doing great, and I'm not going to beat myself up for things that I couldn't help and didn't know.
Yes, yes. And I know that a lot of times, and I guess these are the people that I see in my office as a trauma therapist specializing in autism,
Oh,
is
yeah.
so many people that just can't change that self-talk because it's
Yeah.
come at a price. It's come as a result of trauma. I have people that have told me when they got on the bus every day that they would have to try not to throw up because they were so anxious, and then get to
Yes.
school and, get sick in the bathroom and then go on with their day. Like that was just
Oh,
kind of part of their day, and they just
yeah.
accepted it and moved on. That's terrible. Things like that I
It
hear all the
is.
time. Have you heard stories like that?
I have, and I've
Mhm.
also heard, I'm so glad that you have your specialty and that you're out there for people, because sometimes somebody will be told, well, you're not autistic, you just have trauma.
Yeah.
That's like two separate things. But what caused that trauma? Is it maybe caused by being undiagnosed autistic? I mean,
Yeah.
the two so often go together. And it's so important to find someone, like you, who really understands both and can provide that perspective of, you know, it's okay that life is hard and it's not your fault. And here are, the ways that to live with it.
Yeah.
My
Absolutely.
favorite Maya Angelou quote is, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And, I think we're always doing that. Back, 20, 25 years ago, I used to believe that we should teach autistic kids how to be more like the other kids so that they could fit in.
Right.
Well, that's like teaching them to mask and telling them you're not okay the way you are.
Right.
So now I know better. We should be teaching all the other kids, just accept everybody. Some people are different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that, I think, would be so much better for society beyond autism in so
Yes.
many ways. It's where do we focus? Do we focus on the special ed child of trying to change them? Or do we have them continue to be the best that they can be? We don't want to say, oh, you're always going to be the same. Everybody grows and learns. But we really need to focus on the other kids in the class and letting it be okay that somebody is different.
Yes. Yes. I think that that is so important. And that just kind of goes back to educating our educators and educating our doctors.
Yes.
It's been a challenge. I think I've shared before, I've had my daughter on the podcast. She was diagnosed
Oh,
about 6 months ago,
oh,
maybe about 8 months ago now. And she's just kind of adjusting to life now, and like, well, what's different and what's the same. And
yeah.
it's been really fascinating just kind of watching her navigate it. And then as a parent, I'm experiencing something new as well, right?
Yes.
That trying not to beat yourself up because you
Yeah.
didn't see it, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there's no better masker than a kid that's been in theater all their life.
And so many autistic people I've known have been great in theater. I mean, there are famous actors that are now coming out and saying, by the way, I'm autistic. It's like,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, makes sense. um, let's talk a little bit about meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnout. So these are three terms that we throw around a lot in our office, but
Yeah.
can you tell me what do they mean and what do they look like?
Okay. Well, a meltdown is not a tantrum. When little kids have tantrums because they want something, then if you give them the thing, then they'll stop tantruming because they got it. And autistic people typically do not do tantrums. But sensory, uh, if there's a sensory overload, just too much sensory stuff happening, or a social overload, too many people, or a demand overload. You ask them a question, then you ask them another question. You say, do this. Now, when you're done doing this, you do that. When that gets to be too much and they can't regulate it, then it can come out maybe looking like a tantrum, but it's not. It's just an outburst that might include crying. It might include falling to the floor, but it's not a purposeful thing. And the best thing to do is if you can recognize the signs before it happens, give them privacy. Let them go to a quiet place, and if they need to melt down, if you didn't catch it in time, let them do it alone. I mean, you can't leave them alone out in the hall or something, but if there's a little cozy nook in your classroom, if you're a teacher, because it's like if an adult was going to vomit, that's a thing that you would want to do in private. You don't want your boss to say, "Oh no, you can't leave. Here's a bucket. Just vomit and keep going in front of all your coworkers because you can't leave the staff meeting." We would never do that. So to expect a child to stay in the room while they're in a meltdown is not okay. But not everybody responds to the overload with an outburst. Some just by nature are more of a turning inward. And so when it gets to be too much, instead of crying or shouting or falling to the floor, they might just completely become nonverbal, maybe even unable to move, catatonic, in fact, because they just have taken all they can take, and that's the way they respond. It's either an outward meltdown or it's an inward shutdown. But in either case, it's so helpful if we can recognize the warning signs and then allow them a break before they break.
Yes.
And these things like meltdowns and shutdowns, that's kind of like weather on a day-to-day basis. Certain things happen, it's going to be rainy. And so maybe there'll be a shutdown, maybe there'll be a meltdown. Autistic burnout is more of a climate, It's not what's the weather today, it's what's the climate. And if you've had bad weather for a long time, if your climate is, like the North Pole, then that's hard. And that's when an autistic burnout happens. And, we all know the word burnout. This is why so many autistic people either quit or get fired. They can no longer function in the workplace because it has been too much for too long. Now, the problem with an autistic burnout is it takes a long time to recover.
Yes.
And some people don't get back to that level. It's like, I can't take off 6 weeks and then go back to the same job. I mean, they try.
Yes.
But what they could tolerate before the burnout, they can no longer tolerate for the same amounts of time or the same degree.
I am so glad that you mentioned that, because the adults that I work with that are trying to get on disability have an experience that is just horrific. One,
Yes.
of past therapists saying that they're, maybe not saying, but intimating that maybe they just need to try harder. Maybe they're just a little bit lazy. Maybe now that they have different ways to do things, and they wouldn't use those words, but autistic people are extremely intuitive.
Yes.
And they know
know
from the first time that they meet you, whether you get it or whether you don't.
Yeah.
And so I know that part of my job in the therapy room is helping people trust that instinct.
Yes.
And,
So important.
also to just keep reiterating, I am not okay. And in my experience, I've done therapy with people for a year or two before they've gotten back to any kind of baseline, because we're recreating a baseline after a burnout, right?
Yes, it is a whole starting from scratch or before scratch.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that you mentioned the I'm not okay. And of course, there's two levels. Inside them, who they are is valuable and important and okay to be who they are. But they're not okay. If you say, "How are you?" they might pretend and say, "I'm okay," but they are not okay. Even though who they are is wonderful, they can't never necessarily access the wonderful part because the world is not okay for them. And I love that you let them acknowledge that and say the truth. I don't have to pretend, "Oh, I'm fine, everything's fine," when everything is not fine for them. It's hard.
When someone experiences a burnout, so just so that our audience knows, if they've never seen this happen, it almost looks like, well, it is. It almost it's a mental health breakdown. It's an inability. Some people lose their ability to concentrate. Some lose their ability to speak. Some can't even get in the car to drive anymore when they used to do these things every single day. So it can look really confusing. I mean, what are some of the things that you see when someone's experiencing burnout?
Yeah, what you've mentioned, the things that they used to be able to do, they can no longer do. And they might think I'm lazy. They're not lazy. there is a real problem. And the people around them might just say, well, you took 3 days off. Just, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Just get back out there. Just go to work and try harder, like you said. Work harder. You wouldn't tell a blind person to just look harder. You'll be able to read the print.
Right.
Just try.
Oh, that's such a good analogy.
Because they really can't. And it is not laziness. Oh, Devin Price wrote a book called Laziness Does Not Exist, Dr. Devin Price. That's great.
Yes.
And I think we all need to remember, it's not lazy. It's a real, autistic burnout is real. It lasts a long time. And you might be in bed for days. I don't know. Everybody's different. But you have to honor what it is for you. And yeah.
So that was my next question, Wendy, is what would you recommend that someone do if they're experiencing burnout? Let's say they can't go to work today and they're like, I'm not gonna be able to go back to that job. I don't know what to do. I'm at a loss. What do you recommend?
Well, and this is what's so hard. If you have a backup system, if there's a family, if you have family members who can take care of you, because you need to be taken care of, really. Then you're probably going to quit the job because you know that you can't take 2 days off and go back when it's that bad. I mean, I really hope you're able to take, that it doesn't get that bad, but sometimes it does. And it is a problem, and I wish I had all the answers. Some people are able to get on disability. It's not easy. You can't just say, I'm autistic, and they'll say, okay, here's money every month. And of course, if you're on disability, it's not very much money.
Yeah.
But it's something. So you're not going to be living on the street. But it's a real problem. And I wish that we had more resources for people. I wish I had an answer.
Yeah, I know. And I love that you're being honest about it, because this is something that we're kind of figuring out as we go. Right.
Yes.
I mean, I know that in my experience, just in raising 2 children who are in their mid-20s now, and in working in the field, so much has changed since I got my degree that it's been almost hard to keep up. You tell me a little bit about some of the changes that you've seen.
Well, wow. It used to be, of course, that autism was a childhood thing. It was almost always boys. And you could, I mean, we wouldn't say, oh, we can diagnose you because you love Thomas the Tank Engine. But a lot of people who love Thomas the Tank Engine. And it was like, do they love the engine or do they love to spin the wheels and watch him turn? Yeah. One time I was testing a little boy and his parents were there, of course, and they had they'd bought him a new little Thomas car, they have little faces on them. And it's wrapped, how the cars come, they've got cardboard and little plastic on the outside. So when he was all done with the assessment, they pulled it out of the purse and gave him the toy, and he was thrilled. And he ripped off the plastic covering and he threw down the toy and he focused on the piece of cardboard that had pictures of all the different Thomas the Tank Engines. He didn't look at the whatever train car that he got. He wanted that piece of cardboard.
Yes.
And that was it for him. He just loved that. Oh. We still had to do all of our tests, and they did support that, in fact, he was autistic. But we can no longer just say, oh, no eye contact, or, oh, they're doing this, because of the masking. We can no longer say it's just children or it's just boys, because we know better. There are a lot of women. There's a lot of trans and non-binary people. Yeah. And they deserve to be recognized.
Absolutely. I mean, speak to that. I think right now it's just so important for us to recognize that while transgender and the LGBTQ population, they suffer a lot more than anybody realizes, because they have so much against them as far as wanting them, they want to be themselves. And yeah. Tell me a little bit about your experience with that.
Well, autistic folk are 3 to 6 times more likely to also be transgender than the general population. So there's a lot of trans autistic people in the world. And unfortunately, some of them are not finding support at home because their parents say, oh, you don't know that you're trans because you're autistic. You can't really understand. You're not trans. And they just won't accept who their child is. I once had a mother that I had known in California call me up because she had a young adult autistic person that I had known, my kids had known. And she really wanted me, she says, I want you to talk to my son and tell him that he's not transgender. And I'm saying, your daughter is an adult. And she says, but I want you to tell my son that he should not get, how can we stop him from getting the hormone treatment? How can we stop him? And I'm going, you can't stop her as an adult from doing what she needs to do. This is your daughter. And she was, I'm sure, very disappointed in what she thought she would get the support from me for what she wanted. And I did not, I was not supportive of that because she was not supportive of who her child was.
Yes.
And maybe now she is, sometimes it just takes time. But I think the first thing you need to do is believe them. Believe your child. When your child tells you who they are,
Yes.
just believe them absolutely and go from there.
Yes. Yes. And that doesn't mean you have to agree. It doesn't mean you have to approve. It just means you have to support.
Yes, because really it is their life. It is not my life. It is not the parents' life.
Yeah.
And they deserve to have love and support, whatever they choose.
Yes.
And
100%.
yeah, and once
And
they're adults, yeah.
It's so difficult, I think, anyway, in transitioning from your child being a child to being an adult that's going to hopefully take care of themselves and make their own choices.
Yes.
Just because your child is autistic doesn't mean they always make bad choices.
Yeah, and I think
Right?
you need to constantly kind of remind both you and your child that they are an adult.
Mhm.
Every single time I take one of my autistic kids to a doctor or a dentist appointment, even though in the past I've always gone in with them, I always let them know in the waiting room, I can wait here or I can go with you. You decide.
Yes.
And if they need me, I'm there. But if they don't, I've got a book to read or something. I can
Yeah,
be in the waiting room.
exactly.
But I don't like to assume that they're going to need me. But it's that, letting them be in the driver's seat of what their needs are.
Yes, and that can be tricky sometimes because I know that, they often will look to the parent because,
Yeah.
I'm my kiddo's, for my son, I'm his safe person, right?
Yes.
And so there's so
That's
many
important.
times, yeah, where he has to look to me or get, some approval from me um before answering about something. And it's just a habit. And so with my son, he's just turned 28 and is minimally verbal, but more and more, I mean, he's still gaining language, which is so exciting.
Nice. That is
And
exciting.
so we've shifted our narrative a little bit as far as when I'm trying to get him to take his medicine, for example, and he always pushes back. Not right now, 5 minutes. And it's the same script. I'm like, okay, 5 minutes. What I've
Yeah.
started doing is saying to him, it's your body and you get to decide when you put the medicine in it. We're not going to be able to leave the
Okay.
house till you do, but this is totally your choice. And you do this when you're
Good.
ready. It's not a do this or else,
Yes.
because he's not a little tiny kid anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the disability sometimes for parents is disarming because you're like, well, but he can barely speak, but he can, and it's kind of a, it's a, I guess a relationship between being able to balance that and, and provide the support as well. Does that make sense?
Yes. It does.
It's
And
tricky.
I think it's important to talk about, not everybody is verbal at all. And
Mhm,
not everybody is as verbal as other people their age. But
mhm.
everybody has the right to choose about their body. And there's ways, and parents know, parents of nonverbal kids, they know their kids.
Yeah.
They know if they don't like something or don't want something. And to give them as much choice as you possibly can, um, between what they wear, even if it's like holding up two outfits and see which one they look at,
Yes.
and what they eat, if they have certain needs. I think more and more I've seen online autistic adults sharing about like nutritional supplements that have helped them
Yeah.
to be able to be healthy, even though they have a very limited food repertoire. That, and I think we need to honor. We're not going to say you can't leave the table until you eat your vegetables
Right.
if it makes them gag.
Oh, especially if it makes sense. I mean, that's a whole other topic, food.
Yes,
We might
it's
be
a
able to
big
do
one.
another time. It's a good one, yes. Well, and that just kind of goes back to my next point, which is autism affects every aspect of someone's
It
life.
does.
Often their health, their sleep, their relationships. So I kind of want to dive into a little bit of how does a late diagnosis affect relationships, like both in terms of communication with loved ones, self-advocacy. What do you see?
Well, I had been married to my husband David for probably a couple decades, or at least 10 or 15 years before we knew he was autistic. We just fell in love like you do.
Yeah.
And I'm not autistic, but I have some traits or characteristics that we shared in common. Um, I will never say, "Oh, we're all a little bit autistic," because
Good.
I was shy as a child, or I prefer small gatherings rather than big loud parties. Those are preferences for me,
Yes.
and I'm not autistic. But because we had some things in common, we were able to have a really lovely marriage. We were well suited to each other. But when he found out that he was autistic, it was like a weight off of his shoulders. It
Mm,
was reframing everything that he'd ever thought was bad about himself.
wow.
Um, and he did not have a strong self love and self image.
Yeah.
I knew he loved me, absolutely. But he didn't love himself as much as I loved him. And that was something that we worked at his whole life because he deserved to know that he was lovable.
Yeah.
And learning that he was autistic, I think, helped him feel a little more lovable and less like he was just bad at doing things or that he was faking being a good person because, of course, he was masking hard.
Yeah.
Um, and at one point, I think he thought that I was going to divorce him because we had like a disagreement. We'd never had an argument yet. And I was like, couples have arguments, and I'm not going to leave you because of it.
Right.
You know, we're in this. We're in this together for the long time. But
Oh.
I think he felt that once I saw behind his mask, I would just leave him. I I saw more behind his mask than he realized I
I
did.
was going to say, as the wife of someone with ADHD, I know that we know them pretty well.
We do. And we love who they are behind the mask.
Right. Yes. And I mean, that's just so important. I'm so glad that he found you.
Yeah, I'm glad
That's
I
really,
found him.
that's really cool.
He was, as one friend of mine put it, he was the lid to my teapot. We just
Oh,
got along together very well, and we're very happy.
I love that. I love that. Um, so speaking of ADHD, there are a lot of people that I know come into our office and say, I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, or then as a teenager,
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with depression and with, just a laundry list of things. And it turns
Yes.
out they're autistic. Speak a little bit to that. And can both things be true?
Yes, I believe they can. I think in the past, the way the DSM was written, it couldn't be true.
Mhm.
But in the most recent rewritings of it, you can be both ADHD and autistic. I think they call it ADHD.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are. And a lot of people were diagnosed with OCD or trauma, CPTSD, the complex. When things are really complex and people have, someone said, if there are a lot of Ds, OCD, ADHD, PTSD, look for ASD
Yeah.
because maybe there's one that kind of brings it all together and answers a lot of questions. And yeah, autism might be that. That doesn't mean that they don't have the other things because, the anxiety might be because of autism and not being accommodated in the world. Living in a neuromajority world when you're not in the majority,
Yes.
that can be depressing or it can cause anxiety, certainly. And those things are real.
Yes.
But autism is sort of a thread that runs through it all the way, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Um, So if talk a little bit about the role that therapy plays in supporting autistic adults, specifically late diagnoses, and what should people be looking for when they're looking for a therapist who gets it?
I think it's really important to find the right therapist, because the wrong therapist has left people feeling bad about themselves, thinking that they are lazy. If you can find someone who is autistic themselves, or who has a close family member who's autistic, who has already been serving other clients who are autistic for years, they have that experience, that's their specialty.
Mhm.
And then, almost every therapist is going to give you a free consultation. You can use that as your interview for them. Do you feel better about yourself when you talk to them? Do you feel like they get you? And the ones that really specialize in this are the ones who are most likely to get you. And I know there are a lot of therapists out there who are autistic themselves. They don't have to be autistic to get you, but there's a lot out there. And
Are there any
y-
specific questions that you think are most important?
ask what they know about high masking late diagnosed autistic adults.
Great.
Ask what they know about autistic burnout. Ask, what else should they ask? If they know about how trauma interacts with autism, because those
Mhm.
two, well, that's your expertise. They really go together. And if you get someone who says, well, I just do this or I just do that, they might not understand the relationship.
Yes.
If you see them on, Psychology Today or wherever you go, and they check the boxes of what kind of clients they work with, if they check just about every box, including autism, then what that might mean is, I am willing to work with autistic people. I will not discriminate against you because you're autistic. It doesn't mean that they're a specialist or an expert in it. It just means they're willing.
Yes.
And that's not quite enough, is it?
It isn't, because the field is changing so much.
Yes.
I've had yeah, I've had clinicians, even now I'm in Florida, so it's
Ah,
maybe a little 20 years behind down here, but
I'm glad you're there. They
thank
need
you.
you. We all
Yes.
need you.
But I've had people ask, well, isn't this Asperger's? And I'm like, well, we got rid of that label a while ago, but they're not educated enough, right? Because I mean, that DSM that we learn in school it's this thick. And then
Yes.
when it gets updated, if you're not in the field, like one of the
Then you
fields
don't know.
that I am not an expert in is eating disorders. And so when I have someone
Yeah.
that has an eating disorder, I usually refer them either to someone else in my practice or to another practice.
Yeah.
But I know that about me, but there are, therapists are just like they're human, just like everybody else.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it just depends on what you need. You might need someone that will believe you're autistic and just go from there, or you might need someone that can help you deal with the burnout and all of that. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and if you just go through the DSM, a therapist could just ask all the questions like, do you have deficits in social interactions? And a person might say, well, no, because I have a routine for a social conversation. I have a plan for it. I prepare in advance and have scripts available. Therefore, I don't have a problem with that. Um, but if you ask a different question, like, can you tell the difference between someone who's flirting with you or someone who's just being friendly, and they have no clue? They say, no, I never know. Then that gives you information. Whereas just asking the questions right out of the DSM, for one thing, it sounds very negative and clinical and not very affirming.
Yeah.
Neurodiversity affirming is something to look for. And of course, now that that's become a popular term, there are probably going to be people who think that they are neurodiversity affirming, who use that word,
Yeah.
but who maybe they don't have a family member, maybe they haven't internalized what it means to be
Yeah.
neurodiversity affirming.
I mean, I couldn't imagine really understanding this field as well as I do if I didn't live with people that have
Yes,
autism. It's just,
it makes
it's
a
really,
difference.
yeah, it's so difficult to explain to somebody. And very often as a parent, you're looked on as, well, you're just being permissive.
Yeah.
And there's a
Yeah,
lot of judgment.
there is. There is. But parents who know their kids, it's not spoiling them to meet their needs. We're supposed to meet our kids' needs. And parents of autistic kids know better than someone else might. When my oldest was going to be in brownies. Now, we didn't know that any of our kids were autistic at that age, but I absolutely knew that there was no way that she was going to wear that brownie uniform because it was scratchy.
Yeah.
So we bought material that was the same color but very soft, and my mother-in-law got a pattern for a brownie uniform and sewed it all up. And then we sent her off to brownies in something that was kind of like a uniform because I wanted her to feel like the other girls and like she fit in. Years later, I learned she could not possibly care less what she was wearing, what they were wearing. She did not care about the uniform and about fitting in. She certainly cared about how it felt. She would not have worn something scratchy. And we knew that about her, even though we didn't have a label. And parents know their kids.
Yes. Yes. You know, the sensory issues, that's the last thing I do want to talk about with you are the sensory issues and how they aren't just, you know, sensory issues that don't affect anything, right? They very deeply affect our emotions, even if you're not autistic. Can you talk a little bit about that, the sensory system?
Yes. The extremity of sensory responses is something that most people have trouble understanding because nobody wants to wear scratchy clothes. Nobody wants to feel too cold or too hot. But it doesn't overtake our entire being the way a sock with a seam that's crooked can mean that now I can think of nothing else in class. One of my kids, when they were small, I got them, little tennis shoes like other kids were wearing. But it was a kind of canvas fabric, which if you scratched it with a fingernail or if you brushed it against each other, it would make what to that child was a horrible sound that would then leave them kind of frozen for several minutes after they heard it. And it would make their stomach hurt and make them feel like throwing up when they heard that sound. So every day in school, she spent her day with her feet apart, just concentrating on do not let those two shoes touch each other. Never told me this. I had no idea. But now we don't bring anything into the house that is made of canvas. We check materials before we buy an item. It's like, no, that sounds bad. And we all know it.
Wow. That's fascinating, Wendy, because I would let's imagine that your child was nonverbal. Right?
You never know.
What would they do? They'd probably take the shoes, throw them in the backyard. You know what I mean? And you'd be like, oh, bad kid.
And even though my child was very, very verbal,
yeah,
I mean, very verbal, that wasn't something that had ever occurred to them to say out loud because I think they assumed that we all knew that, but that there was no choice but to wear shoes because that's the law at school. And these are the shoes, therefore. Never occurred to them to say, these shoes make a sound when they touch each other. I mean, I didn't know for years that they had that experience. Also, the sound of eating. A lot of people are just, the misophonia is real. Mm-hmm. The sound of someone else eating, or even of themselves eating. I mean, I used to always want to let's eat around the table, as like when I grew up. And when my kids were small, we always ate around the table. But at some point I realized we have to eat in front of the TV set and there has to be noise on. The TV set has to be on. It might be Murder, She Wrote, it might be Midsummer Murders, who knows? We like a cozy mystery. Yeah. But it has to be playing while we eat because I think all three of my kids have that, even the one that's not autistic, that the sound of chewing is horrible. And I have subconsciously learned that when it suddenly goes silent on TV, if I'm in the middle of chewing, I will just freeze. And then the sound starts up again, and then I'll start chewing again. I found myself doing this alone in a movie theater with popcorn or whatever. When the movie theater goes quiet, I stop chewing my popcorn. Because it has become ingrained. Yes. And I like it when things that are helpful to my family can become ingrained. Because before that, I had the opposite. It's just like, well, of course we can sit around the table. Of course we don't need sound going on while we eat. We're going to talk. And we can talk, but we can't have silence while we eat.
What's so interesting is that the way my brain would work, that background noise would make it harder for me to have a conversation. But unless I have that background noise, my kids can't have a conversation. They almost
Interesting.
need that energy in the room.
Yes. Yeah. And if it is the kind of thing where we need to focus too much on the TV show because we're going to find out who the murderer is, or we need to focus on the conversation more, then they might say, let's mute it for a minute because I need to really focus on this, and then finish that conversation. But most of the time, it can just play in the background and it's fine with everybody.
That's really an important point, Wendy, because even with young children, when I talk about the parents complaining about screen time, or she was doing her homework on the computer and then the music was going and then an iPad was going over here and there were 8 things going on and I told her to turn it all off. I'm like, why? Because your way is better. Like, as long as she's getting the work done,
That's the thing.
it's
Because
okay. Trust they know what they
kids are,
need.
yes, what they need. Some kids need quiet. Some kids need noise. And we should trust them. At a certain age, they're going to know what they need. And
Absolutely.
I know a lot of parents say, "Oh, no screens when you get home from school." But the truth is, like the video games that people play, when you're in those games, you can be saving the world, killing the dragon and rescuing the princess, and you can succeed and feel good about it because you have planted the crops and you know you're the hero. At school all day, you might have been the stupid kid, the awkward kid, the social misfit, where you were not winning all day at school, especially if you're a teenager. But when you get home, that can really fill up a person and release the stress of the day. So I wouldn't necessarily say, no games. It's like, what are they getting out of the game? And how much time do they need to self-regulate? And ask them. It's like,
Yes.
I don't want you to do it too much. What's too much for you?
Yes. And parents always think that kids are just going to be like, oh, I think I need 5 hours. Well, if they're used to not making their own limits, then yeah, they're going to say that. And
They
then
might.
I always tell parents, you know what, that's a little excessive. Let's keep it around and give them a parameter, right?
Yes.
Between this long and this long, between half hour and 1 hour. What will you pick between that? And a lot of kids will pick 59 minutes and 30 seconds or
Okay. Yeah.
whatever
Well,
smart
sure.
aleck thing they will.
Of course they will.
And just let them, because
Yeah. You don't have to give them 6 hours as an option. But
right.
giving them an option so they have choice, that
Yes.
is so empowering.
I call it perceived control.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and it
Perceived
is control.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
just not
And
ultimate control of all
right,
things.
right,
None
right,
of us have that.
and we find that choices are helpful with post-traumatic stress disorder as well.
Ah,
With whenever I'm teaching a family member about how to deal best with their family member that has PTSD, whether it's a spouse or a child or a parent, I usually
yes.
say, remember that choices are important. So whether it's, do you want to
Yes.
eat now or in half an hour?
Yeah.
Little teeny tiny choices like that are really important. I'll say to my son, if we're going in the car, do you want to bring something with you? Is there a fidget you want to bring? And whatever he says is it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I
right.
want to bring
He
this,
chooses.
caterpillar, or I don't want to bring anything. Okay, great. I'm not going to tell you what you need.
That is so important.
Yeah.
And,
And for a while, we might need to tell them what they need. I had to teach my son, okay, if you have a headache, this Motrin is going to help you.
yes, these are related.
These are related. Right. But now he has the choice.
Mhm.
I can put the medicines out and be like, okay, if your head hurts, you want this one. If your belly hurts, you want this one.
Yeah.
Which one do you think would be better right now? And then he can communicate better. So, and I'm just using that as an
Nice.
example because he was sick this weekend and that's what we dealt with. So,
Yeah. Oh,
but
and
yeah.
oh, I've found I have an autistic child who can be very, very verbal when they are not under any stress at all. But if I'm asking questions, I might say, okay, 1, if you want this, and 2, if you want that. And then they can just hold up 1 or 2 fingers. Now,
Yep.
this is someone who has language, but in that moment, they need to have a choice that they can just hold up a finger. And this is after years of me asking questions wrong, where I would say, do you want a da-da-da or would you rather da-da-da? And it's like, that's not even a yes or no question. I can't nod my head because you've just given me 2 choices. 2 choices when it's simple, 1 or 2, that makes sense. But two choices when it's me prattling on for a whole paragraph about it, because that's my style, that I am learning to control.
I'm so glad I'm not alone in that, Wendy.
Oh, I don't know if it's a mom thing or a teacher thing or a therapist thing, but I will talk more than I need to.
Yes. Yeah. All right. It's
Oh,
a
and
female thing, I
oh,
think. I
and
hate to
talking
say
about
that.
choices, sometimes there can be too many choices. We're in a place now where there are four of us, and we are all adults, and we're not even young adults. We're adults. They're all in their 30s to 40s,
Mhm.
and they're all capable of cooking and making decisions. But at the end of the day, none of us wants to hear the question, "What's for dinner?" Not one of us, and although I was the mom for many years, that was my job. It has not been for quite some time. I'm in my 70s now. I'm not the go-to, I will plan and prepare all the foods. So we have to come up with plans.
I love that.
And it's not all on me. But it's
That's
it's not
wonderful.
all on anybody. We're still working this out. We're still trying to figure out how,
Yep.
when we're tired and we need to eat, we don't want to always have the same microwave stuff that we pull out and
Right, right. And that seems to be the bane of our existence too. It's like dinner with
Yes. Yeah.
so what's fascinating is my daughter loves to cook and she's a better
Oh,
cook than I am. So I will let
all
her
my
cook.
kids are better than me.
Right? Isn't that wonderful? They should be better
Yeah.
at something than we are, which
There's
is
several
great.
things they're better at than me.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, and so I'm hearing your grown children still live with you?
They do. They
Okay,
do.
mine as well. And so that term that I'm hearing a lot from parents, failure to launch, is that a term that you'd ever use?
I never have used that.
Okay.
And not all of my kids are autistic, but they're all disabled.
Okay.
And one of them for a while was living in a disabled housing project where it's based on your income. So
Mm,
if you're disabled and you have disability income, then you can have a one-bedroom apartment. My youngest was the first to move out. And after after the after an election and some talk about people talking about what autism is
yep.
or isn't,
Yep.
that is in the news that is disturbing.
Very.
Um, uh, uh, she decided that this is a circle the wagons moment and that she's moved back home.
Nice.
We've had 3 circle the wagons moment. The other 2, we were already living at home, so that was okay. When David died, he was 54 when he had his heart attack, and we were not prepared. So we just kind of, amongst ourselves, we closed the ranks, and it was just like the 4 of us against the world. Not that we didn't have support systems outside, but we were very
Sure.
much there for each other. And then when the pandemic came, I couldn't ask for better company to be locked down with than my kids. But that was another circle the wagons moment. It's like when we first heard, everybody stay inside for 2 weeks, we said, we're going to stay inside for 4 weeks. If they say
We've been
stay inside
training
for a
for this
month,
our
we're
whole
going to
life.
stay inside for 2 months. And guess what? We're still inside
I love
most
that.
of the time. And
Yep.
we wear
Yep.
masks when we go out because my one who's not autistic is very vulnerable physically. And if we brought it home, she would get it. And if
Yeah.
she got it, it would be very, very bad for her health.
Yes.
So we have to be careful. And we know how. And now with the climate being what it is, I mean, we live near Portland. We're in Salem, Oregon. And
Okay.
apparently it's war torn.
Apparently.
Haven't seen it.
I didn't think so. I have friends in Portland and family. Yeah. They're like,
So you know.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's a
but
difficult
there's a,
time.
a lot to be concerned about, and I think if you're disabled, the fear of losing support, and I'm, old. I'm retired, I'm on Social Security.
Mhm.
What if they took that away? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll keep writing books. I love to write books, but yeah, so we do circle the wagons and we support each other and family's so important. I my heart kind of hurts for people that don't have that family support. I wish that everybody did. Or find your family
Mm.
who is not your born family. We recently discovered a group related to a church in our neighborhood. It's like trans autistic crafters.
Wow.
It's like,
What a cool niche.
yeah, it's like, that is really cool.
Wow.
So there are people out there who will be your family. Maybe you'll find them on Discord or I don't know, TikTok. I recently started doing the TikTok.
You did?
So
Goodness.
I did.
Wow, good for you.
Somebody challenged a group of us and said, for 30 days, let's post a TikTok every day. And it's like,
Oop.
okay.
I love that about you, Wendy. You're like, oh, give it a go. What the heck?
And I'm not good at it, but I'm doing it anyway. And maybe
Good.
I'm having fun. That's, I guess, the main thing.
That's really wonderful. And you have so much knowledge to share. I'm sure we could go on talking about this, but I want to be mindful of your time. The last question that I ask everyone that comes on the show, you might remember, is that if every autism parent were listening, what would you want them to know?
First, you're doing a wonderful job. You are doing great. All parents sometimes wonder if they're doing it right. You're doing it right. And just love your child for exactly who they are. Don't try to have a different child than what you've got, because your child is perfect. And it will mean so much to them to know that you do accept them exactly as they are. You're not wishing that you had a different child. Your child is the one that you love.
I love that. On that note, thank you so much for being with us today. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
Well, my website is my name, WendelaWhitcombMarsh.com. And on TikTok, I am Wendela50.
Yay, good. And we'll link all that in the show notes.
Oh, thanks.
So thanks for coming on, and you take care. We'll have you on again soon.
Oh, wonderful. It's good to see you again, Janine.
Same here. Thank you for joining us for this insightful episode of the Autism Blueprint podcast. Here are a few takeaways from my conversation with Dr. Marsh. Late diagnosis impact. So many adults discovering their autism later in life experience a little bit of relief as they reframe their past experiences and understand their unique challenges. We discussed masking, where individuals may mask their autistic traits to fit in, leading to feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. So recognizing masking can help in understanding someone's true self. We also covered meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnout. So these experiences are not tantrums, but they're responses to the overwhelming sensory or social demands. And it's crucial to recognize those signs and provide support when needed. We also discussed neurodiversity affirming therapy. So find a therapist who understands autism if you're a late diagnosed person, and being able to find that person who understands the complexities of it is essential. You want to look for a professional who specializes in working with late diagnosis in particular, because that can be a little bit different than getting a diagnosis as a child. We discussed also the sensory experiences. So sensory activities can significantly affect emotions and daily functioning. And it's important to honor those individual needs and preferences regarding sensory input. And lastly, we talked about support as well as autonomy. So parents and caregivers should empower autistic individuals to express their needs and make choices about their lives whenever it's possible. That will foster independence and self-advocacy and eventually lead to better self-esteem. Well, that's it for today on Autism Blueprint. If you would like to be my neighbor or even a house guest, check out our Patreon Discord community at patreon.com/Autism Blueprint. Your support keeps the porch light on, and a huge thank you to all of our current patrons. If you're not ready to become a patron, be sure to sign up there for free so you can receive updates by email about upcoming episodes and opportunities to connect. Thanks again. Have a great day.
The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional.